I have said this time and time again, but I really dislike novelizations that just take the episode and write it down step by step, including the dialogue. The same actions and the same plot order. And in the case of this novelization, The Time of Angels by Jenny Colgan, it literally takes the same cuts from the episode. If they're cutting back and forth, it will be the exact same kind of pacing as the episode, and that just does not apply for a novel at all. You can't just take something like a cutting back and forth between two moments and write it in the same way in a novelization. It just doesn't work objectively. I will get into more stuff about the novelization later on, but it really threw me off when I started reading this novelization, and the cuts and everything were exactly the same as the start of The Time of Angels, cutting between River in the spaceship and the Doctor and Amy in the museum, and then the TARDIS, and then cutting back, back and forth, and even being able to visualize the same shots. Like, there is almost nothing new in this novelization. There's maybe a few pages at the start that lure you into maybe a false sense of security, like, oh, okay, maybe there's a few new things I can learn from this, and then it just gives up. I was already hesitant when I saw the size of this novelization. It's struggling to focus on it because of how small it is, but they couldn't even really fit the title on the spine. I mean, I don't have the other books with me, annoyingly, but compared to the other two that were released, this one is so much shorter. And I've spoken about it with the Zygon Invasion novelization, but when you have a two-parter, you can't. It's don't get me wrong. I can imagine. I mean, I don't know what the constraints are with writing these novelizations, but there was definitely more that could have been done here, because we can see with something like Aliens of London that it is much longer. For some reason, I mean, there's at minimum 50 extra pages that could have been put in here. And, ideally, for all of the two-part novelizations, they should be a little bit thicker, Something like Empire of Death, that one is actually quite thick. And I've not read it yet, but I can tell that there's clearly some substantial stuff in there. Whereas this is like half the size, and it's a two-parter. This is shorter than some of the novelizations, than most of the novelizations of single episodes. I don't know how, but I mean, I know how, but like, I don't know why, because the speed of this book is insane. It just rattles it off. I mean, you're like, if you think about it, obviously, when you see how short it is, you've got This Is the Time of Angels, and then this is Flesh and Stone, and there's nothing to it. You've just got plot, and that's all you can do. I don't entirely understand why there wasn't more in here. My hesitancy was reinforced by a post on Facebook that Jenny Colgan made about a plot point that most people who will have watched Series 5, in fact, I mean, if you remember Series 5, you will know why. When the Doctor leaves Amy in the forest with the clerics, and then the Doctor shows back up again, with jacket and everything, that's a future version of the Doctor. Everyone who's watched Series 5 knows that that's not the same Doctor that we just saw. And this is something you could have easily Googled as well, but for some reason, I mean, at least she asked, I suppose. But I don't know. That being said, before I read this novelization, I didn't want to rule it out, because I had read The Christmas Invasion by Jenny Colgan, and I remember that being pretty good. Maybe I have to revisit it, and it wasn't as good as I remember, but I remember enjoying it. In fact, it's the only novelization that I read in one go. I'm a very slow reader, but I read The Christmas Invasion in one go on the train, and it's one of the reasons why I actually started reading the Target novelizations. It was the first New Who one that I had read, and I was like, you know what, these are actually all right. And so I decided to keep going with them, and make these videos, maybe I do need to revisit it. In case you don't know who Jenny Colgan is, she's written a handful of Doctor Who stories, both in written and audio, but notably she did the two kind of special new series adventures novels, Dark Horizons and In the Blood, and she is a well-known author in her own right as well. Of course, like I mentioned, she wrote the novelisation for The Christmas Invasion, and so I believe she's the only author to have written two novelizations for New Who anyway. Like I said, I feel like I'm waffling and I'm dancing around the point, but this is quite possibly one of the worst novelizations that I've read. That's not to say there wasn't any merit to it, or the fact that maybe someone else could enjoy this story. I just didn't particularly enjoy it. I've mentioned in a lot of my videos that I just don't think that novelizations of New Who can be the same as novelizations for Classic Who anymore. You know, back then, not the only reason, but one of the primary reasons for these novelizations was so people could actually read or experience the stories, because, you know, VHS, DVDs and Blu-rays didn't exist until a bit later. Some of them, of course, were better than others, and you had authors like Terence Dicks who wrote most of them, and they were kind of just rattled off. You know, they were more of like, here is the story, because you can't really watch it again unless there happens to be a repeat or whatever, or, you know, when it's in the 90s, if you can afford the VHSs, so on and so forth. But yeah, with New Who novelizations, there really has to be some extra reason to pick up this book. Spending 9, 10, 11 pounds on this much stuff to basically just experience the exact same story that I've watched a good amount of times during my childhood, it's, you know, a kind of a waste of money, and it's a shame to say, but I guess I wouldn't really recommend picking up this novelization unless you're maybe like a die-hard fan of The Time of Angels, which I don't think a lot of people are. I mean, I quite enjoy it, but this novelization has not done much for me. Quite possibly one of the only things different here is River being stated in the novelization as obviously being Amy's daughter, which is not something we were aware of during that episode, and I'm unsure as to whether I would have included, or like whether it should have been included, that kind of knowledge for the reader. Obviously, if you're reading this, you are probably quite familiar with that fact anyway. You're not reading this novelization before series 6, so it makes some sense to include that kind of information instead of just like not talking about it, not mentioning it. But I don't know, I think like there's just the direct nature of it mentioned throughout this book is kind of off-putting, you know, like we get it, you know, and it was obviously all kind of in River's head because she doesn't just mention it in the episode. Obviously, this is the first time Amy meets River, and apparently, according to this, the last time River meets Amy, which just isn't right. It literally states on page 58 that River is sad that she'll never see Amy again, and yeah, that's just completely untrue. We know for a fact that she shows up directly after this story in The Wedding of River Song, and then it later on in The Angels Take Manhattan when she's already a professor, so you know that takes place later as well. I'm not sure why it's stated here that she won't see her again, and like, you know, it's nice to think about like how River is trying to compose herself or whatever in front, like with the knowledge that this is an Amy who has no idea who she is, but it doesn't add anything to the story. It's not used in any way to alter River's motivations whatsoever. Like, it's just used as like, oh yeah, by the way, this is a thing. You remember this thing? It's cool, isn't it? That River is Amy's daughter. Like, yeah, we know. Cool. But I really don't have too much to say. I mean, rewatching these episodes as well alongside, like after reading this novelization, could really see how little of the atmosphere and the suspense and the drama is actually kind of tangible in this novelization. The characters feel so 2D, you know, and it feels like you're reading this simply for like knowledge. Like you're reading this so you can have the story. It's like you're reading the Spark Notes version of the Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone. There's no intrigue for the characters involved because the novelization relies so heavily on you visualizing the story, the episode in your head, that it doesn't bother trying to recreate the nuances of the characters that make a lot of episodes of Doctor Who so satisfying for people. You're just reading the like it's like you're reading the transcript, more or less. I mean, I hate to be a Debbie Downer with some of these novelizations, but and I mentioned this with the Satan Pit, is there is obviously a lot of subjectivity that goes into it, and I'm sure it's not impossible for people to just kind of be happy with reading it. But at the end of the day, I spent like 10 quid on this novelization and I've gained nothing from having read it, and that might be subjective, but I feel like there are some objective problems with this novelization as well. Yeah, and it's a shame as well, because even if I didn't necessarily enjoy the Satan Pit as much as other people did, the novelization, I mean, I can really appreciate what Matt Jones tried to do, and then Joseph Lister took definitely a more kind of simple take, but I actually enjoyed that one a bit more. It still felt like it was written from the heart, and that there was a lot of love poured into that novelization and appreciation for the episodes and stuff that came before and after, and it was a kind of a really nice novelization. But this one, I don't feel anything from this novelization. They're just words on a page, and I really, again, like I said, I don't like to be negative, but I feel like in this case there is quite a bit of an objective reason for me to be negative. So for that fact, I will be giving The Time of Angels by Jenny T. Colgan a 3 out of 10, which is actually, I think, my lowest rating for a novelization, just under like The Eaters of Light and Twice Upon a Time and Planet of the Ood. I think those are my lowest ones. Yeah, it was quite sad, but I guess by the end of it, it was also quite quick. So that's it for the 3 novelizations that were released in March 2026. I made a video trying to predict the next novelizations, so feel free to check that out, and I'll probably make a video talking about these 3 novelizations as a whole, whether I would recommend them or not. If you've seen my 3 reviews, you probably know what my verdict is, like including on this one. But yeah, I mean, of course, I'd still love to hear what you guys thought of this novelization if you read it, and all 3 of the novelizations if you've read any of them. But yeah, it was quite disappointing. But I believe the next video, I've already read it, but the next video that will be coming out for novelizations is the Kablam novelization, and then I'm still yet to read the Witchfinders. So be on the lookout for those, and I'm also interested in finally getting to read the 60th anniversary specials, the season 1 and season 2 novelizations. There's quite a few of those, to be fair, and it I don't know. I really don't know what to expect with those novelizations. So we'll see when the time comes. But yeah, again, let me know what you thought in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.